one.
Well, welcome everyone. It is episode 4 of Addressing the Elephant in the Room. And we have an amazing co-host as always, Mr. Jason Spafford, and exceptional results now, winning with exceptional, with all of these fun categories of businesses that I can share with Jason about. I am the founder and owner of One Light Ahead, and we have even more influential guest with us today, Mr. Peter Riddlebarger. And I am just almost at loss of words of how many different things I could use to describe the powerful influence you have. And yet I'm excited to the opportunity that you have joyfully committed to be on the hot seat today. So Peter, you work with Cloverdale Foods. You are quite a powerhouse in the restaurant industry, and you chose an elephant for the day. So what elephant would you like to address today?
Well, thank you, April, and I appreciate you guys inviting me to be on the program. Uh, I've been in this industry, in the food industry specifically, for over 30 years, and having started from not knowing anything about the industry to where I am today, as a term that you and I use, consistently, has been quite a journey. And in doing so, there's a lot of lessons that I learned and a lot of information that is traded and shared, but certain things, as I mentioned earlier, remain the same. The first time I really truly got a break in the industry was when I paid my dues for about 7 years as what I was termed a food broker. And the opportunity to begin to move up in the industry was presented to me by virtue of the need of a very large Fortune 100 company needing to hire a more diverse and inclusive sales force. And in doing so, they were given my name as a potential candidate to fill the need in Northern California, and subsequently got hired. But as I got hired, I was also hired and introduced to the company as a minority candidate. And that has never quite sat very well with me, because certainly while I earned the right through my work ethic and my abilities to be introduced to this company and recommended by one of my largest clients, still the fact that I was the only reason why they're considering me was not exactly something that I've never forgotten it. And diversity, inclusiveness, equality, pay scales, all those things continue to surface through the years, and it is no different than where we are today. And the question then becomes, of course, how do you overcome? And to give you a little bit of background, I have 3 years of college studies. Originally, I studied to be a geological engineer, so I was never really intended to go into sales. And I moved out of my home at 19 years old, and I didn't finish. So to elicit, the names of 3 other major Fortune 500, maybe even Fortune 100 companies who wouldn't consider me for a job in spite of my skill set, because I didn't have a college degree. So these things are all kind of intertwined in as far as how people are viewing you and how they're considering you for hire and for compensation. So we fast forward to today, and you are looking at an established veteran in the industry who in many ways has a clientele that goes back 20 plus years, and suddenly the value equation changes. But I'm also now 59 years old, and the question is, can we hire somebody younger, faster, may not know hardly anything, for half the price? So the elephant in the room begins, with how do you, negotiate through all these turbulent times? I happened to read on LinkedIn just this past week a young lady who was similar to me in age when I got my career break. She had posted that she was frustrated that she was not getting any callbacks because of her resume being very singular in terms of her career path. She couldn't branch out, and she couldn't. Her frustration was, how does she, get those other opportunities? I happened to have gotten mine because there was a minority candidate. And that broke me into, for example, the week after I went to work for, I'm not going to mention this company, but it's a very large cereal company in the United States. The week after I came back from my corporate training, another company, and I can mention their name because I never worked for them, was Stouffer's. Stouffer's called me and tried to hire me away from him a week after I went to work for this major cereal company. And you will walk down any cereal aisle in a grocery store and you will find their products in prominent display. So it was amazing to me that my value in less than 2 weeks' time had changed greatly to where this company wouldn't talk to me a month before. Suddenly they're calling me and offering me more money and begging me to leave the job I just took. And in part also because, as I was introduced at our national meeting, our minority candidate is Peter Riddlebarger. Well, they look at me and they look at the fact, of course, I had much darker hair way back then. And they see a young man at about, roughly 32 years old or so. And, they look at me, they're Riddlebarger. He doesn't sound like a minority. Well, I'm half Hispanic. My mother's Peruvian. And then they hired a gentleman by the name of Harry Stewart, and Harry Stewart happened to be Japanese. So, so it was an odd start to our careers. I made chairman for 2 years in a row. I have a nice, pretty little Eagle Award sitting behind me, and I was successful in representing General Mills. But just the fact that I went to work for, I gave up the company. Just the fact that I went to work for them broke all sorts of opportunities open for me on both fronts, in that I was still looked upon as a minority candidate, but now I was looked upon as a minority candidate with skills and with some skins on the wall as far as being able to prove to the rest of the corporate world and other manufacturers that I could handle the job. So that still continues to be the case today, and is reflective on the young lady that I mentioned a little bit earlier, because the way that I built my resume and my career, I can go into at least 4 or 5 different markets. In the food industry, you would have food service, which is what I'm currently in. I also do work within the convenience store segment. I do business also into fresh manufacturing for people who use our products as an ingredient, what is classified as industrial. So there are other areas that if you were to look at my resume, my name pops up a lot when searches are done on LinkedIn, or recruiters that contact me, or they're seeking for referrals. So this, in essence, brings to light the fact that while you were in a job and you want to either better yourself within the job, or you want to be compensated, at a level playing field with others, you need to continually learn, and you need to, break those barriers so that your resume does become, more diverse, and that people, in broader spectrums will look at you and consider you. This young lady, while she loved what she was doing, she stayed in a singular lane and neglected, to see outside of those blinders that she was wearing, what other opportunities lied within the company she was with. And suddenly she found herself unemployed and with a very narrow path to finding a new job.
So Peter, you have covered a lot of questions about your history and what set you up to understand the elephant in the room. And to clarify, I'm sure Jason is going to narrow into one more depth of that. And if you were to say, what causes that to rise to the top of your radar? What would you like to dive deeper into that before Jason goes into his depth of questions?
I believe that the more I could become of value to any company by many, many attributes, but one, of course, is to be a resource. And I chose to, for example, because I didn't have a college degree, I chose to hang out a lot with my R&D team. So I learned a lot of technical things as they related to, production of poultry products, of pork products. I have visited over 30 different processing and manufacturing facilities throughout the industry. I can talk to people about equipment. because I've seen the equipment that is used and what it does and how it performs. And I also have learned to understand costing structures to where when I go to speak to a client, I can formulate costing structures. Likewise, the different, product categories in which you can make your products fit, the creative side of things, or all the chefs that I hung out with to understand the culinary applications side. So all those things being put together by me intentionally help round out, who I became and who I am today. So I can literally speak to a retailer as I can speak to a mom and pop store. My goal is always to, even if I don't make that sale, and even if it is not that day, is to deliver value and to be a consultant that they'll come back to in the future. I have people who call me today that I haven't done business with in years, but I will still pick up the phone and I will still listen. And if there is something that I can offer them, I'm always happy to. But if there isn't, I'll certainly always be upfront and say, listen, this is out of my depth. And I do know maybe somebody who can help you, but it's good to hear from you. And let's certainly keep in touch. Maybe another project will come up. Or I'll give you an example as to how this develops and how it adds, how you bring value to yourself and how you eventually address the elephant in the room. I had a client in Ohio, one of the largest private label manufacturers of pizzas in the United States. And the young man was trying to break through in his career and become a big time chef in the what's called the industrial business for manufacturing. And he said, Peter, I love visiting with you. And for a kid that's 25 years younger than me to just tell me I love visiting with you, I said, well, I'd be curious, what it is that you enjoy about our visits. He says, you come and see me and you ask me what I need. You don't come in here and tell me what it is that you want to sell me. And I said, well, that is true because I don't know what you need. And until I ask you and you and I have a conversation, I can't bring any value to this conversation. Now, once we start down the path of finding what it is that you need and that I have the resources and capabilities to develop it for you, yeah, we can start talking about the tens of thousands of pounds that you're going to buy from me. But you're going to buy it from me because I'm the one that asks you what it is that you need and provide that service to you.
Peter, if I can talk a little bit about the value attraction of inclusiveness and diversity. Obviously, you started, in a small position, and you learned the business. And to your credit, you really learned the industry as a whole. But what is the value attraction of inclusiveness and diversity?
Well, what I still have not brought up is the fact that I'm bilingual and I understand a couple other languages. And when I walk in to see a small mom and pop that is their life savings and their business and their investment, I invest the same amount of effort, resources, and capabilities in terms of what I know to help them as I would invest with sitting across from a vice president of purchasing. And my portfolio of clients is diverse. And a lot of my clients will call and speak to me in Spanish, for example. I have people in the industry that are food technicians that are from, Africa, from European countries in some cases that have likewise very smart people who have gotten, where they are in the industry as product development managers or R&D and so on. I've always embraced different cultures and I've never shied away from them. And, we have a global economy and knowing how to be inclusive in terms of the resources that you use to build your networks, it's invaluable because you have your own perspective based on how your career has shaped you. but you also have to be willing to listen to what others have done around you. A lot of my success has been from taking what I've learned from other people to value, to include, what it is that they bring to the table, what I learn from them, what they teach me, is what I take away. I told my buyer at Brinker, which at the time was buying $60 million worth of chicken from me. She's no longer there. But I said to Joni when I first met her, I said, the single biggest takeaway from me in working with you as a director of purchasing is this relationship. Because chances are I will not be with this company the rest of my career. And there's also a great chance that you will not be, with it in the same position with Brinker 15 years down the road. And that has been a fact of life. But every time that I call Joni, she picks up the phone and answers, and we catch up on our families, and we ask each other what it is that we're doing. And at the very least, it'll open a door. But again, this is whether it's women or whether it's people of color or whether it's people of different backgrounds, in some cases, what you do still face, and in my case, what it was is just simply I did not have the experience in the industry. So as I became more experienced, as I gathered more information, as I learned from other people, again, of various backgrounds, various levels, I learned from the guy in the plant, why does this machine work this way? And how can it make my product better? Do you have any ideas? You're watching my product run. I'd go spend days in my plant and talk to people who make $15 an hour or $12 an hour, maybe even 10 back then. And their input, their knowledge of how the machinery worked, and what I learned when I went to talk to a customer and say, hey, customer, I need you to pay X for this item. I cannot sell it to you for Y. And here's the reason why, because I understand the technical aspect of the reasons why I need to ask for more. And I feel that inclusiveness is not just about race or gender, but it's about so many other things. And being able to have the depth of understanding, and you can accept that you're a human being that, can always benefit from learning something new is a quality that you need to embrace for yourself. And we all grow and are better people for it.
Peter, one of the things you mentioned at the beginning was that companies are also looking at downsizing talent, looking at costs, and why should they keep someone your age versus hiring somebody half your age, paying them less and giving them the opportunity, which again, from inclusiveness and diversity, obviously at 59, you're now, a very well experienced and knowledgeable individual within the industry. You could probably go on your own and make a ton of money as a consultant. But from the standpoint of a company understanding the value of someone in your position, again, what is the value attraction that, they would keep you over, letting you go for someone half your age, that they could pay a lot less to?
It would take somebody half my age to come in and do what I do, probably 10 years to come even close to mastering. And I mean, even close. And the business has evolved also in the last 20 years. So being able to build relationships and being able to cultivate those relationships and being able to learn while you go along. Companies don't have the patience anymore either. So a couple of things have happened. There are certain people in our industry that have a broad enough understanding of a lot of different things, a lot of different segments and different topics. And like in my case, and as you mentioned, a career potentially in consulting, that have made themselves, I guess, a little more indispensable. Nobody is indispensable, but at least as it relates to finding the resource and the information more readily available within your own, four walls of a company. Certain people in the industry have backgrounds similar to mine and have expanded their careers to reflect a broad, different market segments like I have. I'm not a unique person in that sense. but there are fewer of us. The meat industry, particularly the protein industry, particularly as markets have evolved. So again, if you continue to build your own value proposition, both at your client level and within your company, you maintain, I guess, that position in which there's an old saying, and it's kind of funny, but it'd be cheaper to keep me in the long haul.
Well, just based on your relationships, obviously someone, half your age isn't going to have those relationships, and that alone is probably worth a lot. And that leads to my next question, which is for the younger audience, really understanding the value attraction if they, do come from a different background. Again, diversity is a hot topic again. It was a hot topic 30 years ago. It's only been around for really 30 or 40 years, that diversity's even been in place. But when you look at when you started to what diversity means in people's mind now today, for the young people just getting started, what should they be looking at in terms of the value, attraction for themselves in being a diverse candidate?
First of all, embrace the fact that you are, a striving to be a diverse candidate. You should always, try and keep on learning outside of what it is that you're doing. This was one thing that's never changed for me. I've always been adventurous. I've been curious. I've always wanted to learn more and be that person of value, be that resource. There became a point in time in which the fact that I was half Hispanic no longer played a part. I was eventually viewed for who I am as a professional and as an individual. So I was able to curve that to where I was no longer looked at that way. And that probably took place about probably 12 years into my career, roughly. It was about a 10 to 12 year curve, I would say, if I had to put a number on it. But it also coincided with, as you mentioned, the last 30 years or so of diversity and inclusiveness being a term and a heightened awareness. And as that term has evolved, or other words have been associated with it, other names, whatever you would call it, eventually I settled into, as I progressed and learned from where I was. I'll give you an idea. My very first big negotiation as a person in the role that I had as a salesperson for the company that moved me to Dallas, Texas. I was working for the retail division, and I was working on a very specific project, and I was grossly underpaid, but I needed a job that moved me from California to Texas. And while working on the project for the retail group on a much smaller scale, the vice president of food service sales saw me, knew me because I'd been his broker before. And he walked up to me about 8 months into the job, and he said, "When you're through screwing around with these silly eggs you're selling, come work for me in food service and let's get out and sell some chicken." Well, that was wonderful. It gave me a little bit of a bump in pay, but I was still probably $40,000 to $50,000 underpaid on an annualized basis. And I was about 32, 33 years old, just about that 12-year curve. And you never know in many cases what your worth is until you have somebody else make you an offer. And that's why my LinkedIn profile and the recruiters that I network with has always been left open. And I always constantly network. I went into a negotiation with the executive vice president of the company, and I was still considered a minority candidate as far as the check box at the company I worked for. And I had just received a $95,000 a year job offer, but I would have to have moved to another state that I really did not, at the time, have any interest in living. We'd only been in Texas for about 2.5 years. So I sat down, and it's like anything that I do, there's always a contingency plan. I'm either going to get fired and I'll take this new job with 30,000 more a year to be made, and I'm going to have to move where I don't want to live for a while, or I am going to be retained and I want to be paid what I'm supposed to be paid. So the elephant in the room was I walked into the executive VP of sales office. I said, hey, Mike, let's have a chat. What's going on? And I said, no, everything is great. I mean, I built my portfolio business. I had a strong case to make. And I said, listen, love living here, love what the company has done for us. You moved us here 3 years ago. You know, we're getting ready to buy our first house. Really don't want to move. But like I mentioned, you know, you don't know what you're worth to the company until somebody else makes you an offer. I said, I've been made an offer. I took an interview with one of our competitors, and this is what they feel I would be worth. Now, I know that I'm not asking you to give me a $30,000 raise to keep me, but I would like to stay, and I would like to be, you know, remunerated more in line with, you know, what my counterparts do. I was still going to be underpaid by a significant amount, but I didn't really want to move. It's just like when I go visit a client. If I'm going to negotiate a price, I'm going to have something waiting to replace that product and that volume, because I'm going to have to take a stand. And I'm not asking for something that I shouldn't, but these are all calculated risks. Within the company I work for here, I made four lateral job changes. I went from being a retail manager to food service national accounts, to industrial, to when I finally got my big bump, 4 years of living here in Texas, I went into director of new business development for the company. That's when I really got my big bump. And the predicate to all those moves and the predicate to moving around sideways, I made a sacrifice consciously. I made the sacrifice that I was not necessarily going to ask for more money in each of those moves, but I was going to take those positions to learn the positions and broaden my appeal to somebody else. At that point, I truly stopped being a minority candidate. The one thing that I really, in hindsight, wish I would have probably just had enough wherewithal to buckle down and get my BA, because it would have made it easier for top 50 companies to consider me. And that was the main reason why I wouldn't qualify to work for some of them back then. So that's a small regret, but you know, diversity in what I offered as a sales rep, as a person, and as what I did was, you know, being accepting and being inclusive to what other opportunities were within the company, and drawing that compromise for myself. So diversity and inclusiveness comes in many, many different ways, and understanding who you are and where you want to be, and sometimes what that roadmap is. You know, to quote the famous trainer and coach April Ballestero, you know, it's a journey, and I'm not making fun of her. It truly is a journey. I've been on a 32-year plus journey in the food industry. Today, one of the biggest things I enjoy is mentorship. There is a young man who's in his 30s who has asked to come work with me several times because he feels he can learn from me. So, you know, when somebody who's half your age almost, immediately within less than a year's time picks up on the thought that I want to come work with you because I'm listening to you and you are what I believe I want to be. And that's a huge compliment. This young man happens to be African American. Okay. And as a matter of fact, I've also referred him to a recruiter of mine, a friend of mine, for potential upward mobility. I don't know if it will be within the company that I'm with, and God, I hope they don't see this. But but this young man, if things wouldn't have changed as our world changed, you know, back in January, February of this year, he would have come out and spent some time working with me, and in no way, shape, or form would I have felt either uncomfortable or intimidated or otherwise. I embraced the opportunity. That's why I've been involved, for example, with the Boy Scouts of America for 20 plus years in mentoring youth and teaching inclusiveness and teaching, you know, how to be a part of society with those kind of, you know, ideals in mind. So that's probably one of the biggest thrills I get is that ability to be able to mentor young people into understanding, you know, how to embrace and how to use diversity and inclusiveness as a strength.
So let me ask you, if I'm a business owner and, obviously diversity and inclusion are hot topics right now,
Mhm.
um, how do I look at these two topics in terms of growing my business and, you know, uh, with you as a mentor or advisor, how would you, guide me in the right direction in terms of what to look for in candidates from a standpoint of diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, boy, that's a great question. Uh, and it's a difficult one at the same time, because you might have to talk to a lot of people. I think that it relates to the character of the individual that you're talking to, and understanding truly uh, that person as a person, their goals and their views. The difficulty is that sometimes that's a very challenging interview to conduct, to truly get to know somebody to that kind of a depth. Because you obviously, when you hire somebody, you're making an investment in that person. You're making an investment in that person that's going to bring a return to the company and bring value to the company. So, how do you go through an interview process? I went through a very, very unusual interview process in my last job. Uh, like most jobs at my level, they put you through a personality test and they try and figure out, what kind of personality you are. April's done this to me, just because you want to
Have a
get to
finder
know.
assessment, yes.
What's that?
Mhm.
Well, the test that I have, and I have my letters here because I kept them. I am an ESFJA, is my personality as far as the test goes, and I keep that handy because I don't always remember exactly the letters, and apparently you change one letter and you're a totally different person. So I don't know which they get, Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde, depending on which letter goes through. But I've also taken enough of those tests, unfortunately and unfortunately, that I know how to manipulate them by the number of answers that I can give in a certain way. So I don't know, in terms of, an employer and younger people, because the generations of today are very different than the generations of, 2, 3, 4 generations ago. Uh, Statistics tell you that somebody's going to change a job every 3 to 4 years. And as I mentioned earlier, the question is, you only know what your value is until somebody else makes you an offer to go somewhere else. And getting to know that person and how you're going to invest in them. Case in point, at the company I worked for here in Dallas when I first came here, a young man had the company I worked for pay for his college. And 6 months after they paid for his master's, he quit and he went to work for somebody else. And he just walked into the same person I negotiated with and told him, "Thank you very much, I'm leaving." And you know, he actually still keeps in touch with me today. But I called him and I told him, I said, "Listen," I said, some people in this company who believed in you went to bat for you and got your schooling paid for, and this is really a crappy way to repay them." He goes, "Well, how dare you tell me that?" I said, "Because it's the truth and somebody's got to tell you." And I've never been afraid to tell people what I think, and I think April will vouch for that.
Mhm.
And I think that we're too caught up in a culture of correctness to where we're afraid to tell the truth or at least state facts. And some people simply believe that they're entitled to their own facts. But again, my answer to your question in a roundabout way is it's a little bit of a gamble, but you're trying to understand the person you're trying to hire and what means you use to understand that person that you're hiring, with that type of individual you're looking for is the most challenging thing I think today, because everything has changed.
So let me ask you a final question from the standpoint of
From
your own.
Jason, at least. But anyways, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Well, I've had him on the hot seat here for a bit, so final question from me, and then April will feed in. From your own standpoint of your investment in your own personal development professionally, everything you've done, and really using your diversity and creating an authentic experience with the people that you've generated relationships with, what is the real opportunity for our listeners in terms of being able to create their own authentic experience with diversity going forward?
I think that we have a daily challenge to embrace diversity and not shy away from it, and learn from the experience. God knows that in the years that I've been, working and learning, uh, I've learned from a lot of people, and yet I've still made plenty of mistakes. In some cases, I've, put some principles to work, and they haven't paid off, but that hasn't deterred me from embracing, decisions and activities that will not help, make what I do or who I'm around with, be diverse. Uh, I'll give you a really strange one. Okay. And this goes to simply, we're all people. I have this really strange, silly habit. Whenever I'm walking into a restroom almost anywhere and I see somebody who's come out from just cleaning it, I always say thank you. And that person many times turns up and looks at me. There's this really strange puzzled look on their face. And I go, thank you for doing that. So as simple as that sounds, I think it creates meaning and value for that person.
Amen.
I'm sorry I'm getting emotional, but we take too much for granted.
It's the truth.
That's awesome.
And Peter, this is just many of the things I adore about you, is that you value people and you value them being valued. And that is where it leads me with my wrap-up question, because our goal in every one of these podcasts is to allow people to walk away with the willingness to have the tough conversations and to acknowledge and see people as they are, not as how they want you. So often people want to create, as you said, an expectation. And I loved how you said to embrace diversity. What I also heard, and I want to congratulate you on the master's degree of the School of Hard Knocks. You've got that more than down. With that being said, I would add in, and that would be my final question for you. You have learned to master. You are consistent about the commitment to master people, to master observation, to master relationships. You have spent a lifetime being purposeful about that. And that would be my question to you is as you end out this elephant and celebrate relationships and mastery in your diversity and inclusiveness, how did you choose that? How did you choose what you were going to be consistent about?
Well, 30 years of marriage has taught me something. So I give credit to my wife.
Mm-hmm.
Having a diverse family, a family in South America, a family here, friends. I don't know, it's hard to pinpoint to one thing. And I guess in many ways, what I've managed to accomplish, and I really hadn't quite dug and delved into looking at myself at this kind of degree of introspection. But I guess in hindsight, and as you pointed out, it's unique in a sense. I don't know that I am in any way, shape, or form special. I think that I guess I'll use this this way of explaining it. I have been through probably 5 or 6 different types of sales training and sales seminars, mm-hmm. in which they teach you about, the needs assessments and value propositions and how to close a sale and so on and so forth. And my last one I did with my previous employer, and it came back telling me that I did not know how to do my job after having been through several. And that really kind of sat me back, and I was like, I don't understand why this is the case. So the gentleman who was presenting the program walked up to me and says, "Are you Riddlebarger?" And I go, "Yes." I said, "I'm excited to look at my scores. It looks like I don't know what I'm doing and I haven't done it all wrong for the last 25 years. He goes, "Don't take that so hard. You're being compared to the top 0.5% of the world people in your field. And the honest to goodness truth is you're the best guy in this room by comparison to the numbers." And I said, "Well, this is really strange, because when you get this test and you don't have this information in front of you as to how it relates," I said, "everybody in this room has been feeling pretty crappy, myself included." And so I was trying to assess this gentleman and why. And obviously, he's selling a pretty significant dollar package to my company at the time. And we had further conversations, and he broke down what it is that his pitch was. And all it was a sales process that turned upside down and reversed. And I said, I said, "This is great." But I said, ultimately, the person sitting across the table has probably taken something very similar to this and understands this. And until you understand what that person really wants and needs to get out of what you're trying to do and do for them, and because it's about them, it's not about you. So you cannot just simply infuse process. And I have process now in my DNA from everything that I've learned through the years. I can walk into any sales call with very little information and eventually figure it all out. But what I do in every single call that I go into is I find out about that person, something about them, something about you, something that is going to make a difference, something that's going to, feel good the next time you and I catch up and talk about things. And, that's one of the hardest things. There are a lot of lessons around every turn, in our lives. The question is, do we learn from those lessons, and do we try not to make the same mistakes? And by no means am I perfect, and by no means do I still believe that I have any kind of mastery. I always try and continue learning. And if there's anything that I would like your folks across the segment that are going to listen to this is, don't cheat yourself. Life is learning, and if you stop learning, you stop living. And that's a cliche, and I'm not a cliche guy, but don't cheat yourself. And there's every person out there in your life that you touch, try and touch them in a positive way, and try and be the best you can be for them. It will always come back to you in a good way.
Well, Peter, I couldn't wrap that up better in adding a resolution or a way we're going to address that elephant so elegantly and appreciate the value of every inclusiveness and diversity that we could possibly be listening. So thank you for that. Thank you to our listeners. Thank you, Jason. Anything you want to wrap us up with?
I certainly feel included after having this conversation with Peter.
Absolutely.
It's nice to meet you. Hopefully we'll get a chance to talk offline. Look forward to getting to know you. And it's been my pleasure. I did not know what to think in doing this. It has been very refreshing, and I wish you certainly the best and continued success. And if you ever want to have me back, I'll be happy to try and do what I can to help out.
Awesome.
We appreciate you, Peter.